In this video, I'm going to look at some common errors that we make in PHP, and we all make them. It's easy to do. One of the easiest when you're starting out in particular is to forget that an equal sign doesn't mean equal. It's an assignment. It says make this variable take on this value. What you really mean to use is the double equal sign, and that will create your is this equal to that. Missing semicolon, again, very common when you're starting out, and especially as you get many lines of code in there, very easy to miss out the fact that you have to have, at the end of each line, you need to have a semicolon. Misspelling variables or functions within PHP, any kind of misspelling, of course, is going to cause problems. So here, we've given a variable this image name, but over here we've forgotten the E. So of course it's not going to work. You're going to get a blank and wonder what's going on. Unescaped quotes. When you've got text inside of quotation marks in PHP, and if you're using single quotes and then you use a single quote inside, you have to escape it using the backslash, of course. There we go. Now notice what happened when I take this out, when I'm missing it. Look what happens to the coloring of the text. This is the reason, whoops, there we go. I need to have my escape in there. This is a reason for using a really good text editor, because this highlighting with colors is so important to debugging your scripts, catching things before they even happen. So I would have noticed, for example, that things aren't looking right here. My text isn't all pink. Oh yes, I forgot to backslash this. So that's a good reason for using a good text editor. Missing brackets. This is very easy to have happen. Remember this from school when you were trying to do math and you had all these brackets that you had to keep track of. Same thing here in PHP. If I put in my other bracket, then I'm okay. Now, one of the ways you can help yourself with this is to leave space. That's what I like to do. Leave a little bit of breathing room. Even, for example, when you're like this, just, it makes it harder to see things when they're tight together, but if you give it a bit of breathing room, you can see that this bracket would have been missing compared with the inner bracket. So that's one way to help combat that. Missing quotation marks, again a problem that would show up with syntax highlighting. So if I put in my single quote at the end here, my next line changes color. So I realize, oh yeah, I forgot to have a quote mark in there. Don't forget you can't mix your quotation marks. Here I've started with a single quote, but I ended with a double. I have to make this a single quote, and again, that would have shown up in color highlighting. Problems with, now I've said missing if here, but it's really just a problem with conditionals in general. Making sure you've got all the parts of your conditional. If you're just missing one element, of course, it's not going to work and you're going to get an error. One thing to keep in mind, and I'll just mention that here because this commonly happens with if statements. Error messages will give you a line number, okay, and you go to your script and you go, oh, that doesn't seem to be a problem there. What it is the error is actually before the point where the error message comes up. And this happens in if statements. The problem happens at the end of the if statement, but actually what went wrong was earlier in the if statement. So don't get confused by where the error is as opposed to where the message comes up. And then one other thing to keep in mind, and this will only happen in certain cases, but if the last item on your page is a PHP element with a closing tag, make sure you don't have any blank lines after that closing tag. Now normally this isn't an issue in a template file, but it can be. It happens more in this file over here, wp-config, which a lot of you may be manipulating for your own purposes. It is a total PHP file. The only thing in it is PHP coding. If you have a closing bracket at the end here, there cannot be any lines after it, or you will get a header started error. Basically, PHP thinks you're starting a new page because of those blank lines. As long as you don't have any blank lines, you're okay. Even better nowadays is we're leaving off the closing bracket entirely. Only if the file is entirely PHP again. If you're mixing PHP and HTML, you have to use closing brackets in order to go back to the HTML. stop the PHP, go back to HTML. But in this file, no, you could leave off the ending tag, or the ending bracket rather, and that prevents you from having any possibility of leaving extra lines at the end because you have no closing tag. So just something to keep in mind when you're working with PHP and some of the errors that you might run into.